Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Legacy Leaders. Scott McMeans here today, joined by Shawn Pruchnicki. Did I do that right?
Absolutely, you nailed it.
Shawn Pruchnicki. Fantastic. He is the owner of Human Factors Investigation and Education. He also happens to be a pretty smart guy because he teaches aviation at the Ohio State University. So, well-rounded guy. He's got a lot of interesting things to talk about. Before we get in all that, I am going to turn the microphone and the camera over to Shawn. He's going to introduce himself, tell us what his story is all about, what he does at HFIE, and why people love working with him. So, Shawn, the microphone, the camera are yours, my friend. Introduce yourself and tell us your story.
All right, thanks, Steve. Well, hello, everyone. And what, as Steve implied, I've actually created this company. I can't believe it's been 16 years now, all the way back in 2009 when I started this. And it's interesting because unlike a lot of other companies, this organization started out of necessity that people came to me asking for help in certain areas that I had already been working in the industry in aviation safety, doing a lot of work as an accident investigator in some other areas in safety. So I was being asked to do, maybe an accident investigation class here, help out with an investigation here. And after about three or four or five of those, I realized that there was a need in the industry, that this was a niche that, there were groups out there, there were companies out there that did all of these individual things, but I could not find anywhere a company that did all of these things,
Yep.
that there was some place where people could go, regardless of the domain, aviation, chemical processing, because my background, even though it was for the most part aviation, that my degrees, however, were in safety in general, that I could cross over to other domains. And it was when I finally got a job I was doing some work for a pharmaceutical company because I also have a background in pharmacy. I'm also a licensed pharmacist. And they found out about me through the lady that ran the safety department had a friend or something that was an airline pilot and knew me through the airline world. And they were having some safety problems at their plant and said, well, maybe we ought to bring in this guy to come and talk about safety issues. And that was the moment where I realized that this really could be a cross-domain company.
Yeah.
And so then what I did was that's when I started marketing myself. And that's when I went out and said, okay, what are some basic classes that I could put together that I could advertise on my website and say, these are 10 or 12 classes that I could perform regardless of what your business is. And so it'll cross over nicely. Just basic, like for example, an accident investigation class. So I could
Okay.
use my training as an accident investigator, but the basics of that class would transfer perfectly over into any other domain.
Okay.
And
So I'm looking at this, Shawn. You've got a really interesting and incredibly diverse background. But what you've done is identify that the mother of all invention is need. So there was a need to have somebody that has the capacity and wherewithal to bring all these investigative elements into one place to make it easier for somebody to get the answers they're looking for. Am I kind of putting that in the right frame of mind?
yes, that's exactly right. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
So if you were to look at all the different classifications or categories of product offering, obviously you've got education because we're talking about safety classes and stuff like that. But when you deal with a client and they're looking at an investigation, what is it that you bring to the table so the audience knows, okay, that's what Shawn does at HFIE. That's okay. There's a lot there. So I want to make sure people understand what it is you offer.
So you mean on the front side, as far as these are the things that I could do for you right now?
Yeah.
These are the programs that are already put together that you can look on my website and say, these are the seven or eight classes that I can choose,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I had those already created and already put together, but there were two caveats to that. One was I also left an opening saying, it's kind of going to a Mexican restaurant, right? There's the combo one, create your own,
Hmm.
right? You can just you tell me what your needs are because I realize it's not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake that I've seen other companies that are similar to mine try to take what we've done in aviation because aviation is kind of the end all be all in safety, right? Aviation, no one has a better safety record than aviation, and all these other organizations they want to be like aviation as far as the safety record goes, right?
Yep.
But it's not a cookie cutter approach. So you have to be able to be nimble enough to say, okay, we investigate plane crashes this way, but you're a pharmaceutical company, so we're not going to investigate exactly the same way. Or if you're not interested in exactly these types of classes, we can alter them for your needs.
Okay.
Say for this class, we have these 8 parts, but you're not interested in these 3 parts. We'll cut those out. Maybe we'll put something in place. Maybe we'll just leave them out. Or you can just tell me what your problems are. Let's just
Mhm.
start from scratch. Tell me what you need. What is the problem at your organization? And we'll start from scratch. That
I
I
lo-
found was so important in the beginning before anyone knew who I was that they knew they could come to me and just say, here are the, before I really became known for specialty areas, which we could talk about later,
Mm.
before I became known for those specialty areas, that was what was so helpful was to be nimble like that, to
Yeah.
saying, great, he's got these 7 or 8 classes, but you know what? I'm just not interested in those 7 or 8 classes. So let's just talk to him. And
Yeah.
being nimble like that is what was so helpful, that flexibility.
I love the idea of what you said, like the Mexican restaurant, get yourself a combo. You make it, right? So you tell me your needs, or in your situation, as you described, tell me the problems that you're having, and we'll figure out the solution. That's a really good customizable approach. Despite the fact, as you said, there's 8 different options I can provide you, but maybe it's number one, four, and six that I give you, and you don't need the other five. Maybe it's any combination of those that's going to make your experience better because what you're looking for is a problem to be solved right now. And then down the road, we can figure out other ways to help you. But let's solve this problem today. I love that approach because, quite frankly, I've done a little bit of alterations in my business where instead of having people come and pick and choose what they want to do, I'm asking better questions. I'm figuring out what it is they're looking for. So, in essence, I'm really going out and asking people, what problems are you experiencing and how can I help? And it's allowed the conversation to start with a lot less anxiety on both parts and a lot more inquisition on both parts to say, I just want to help. So how can I help you? So I love the approach. So thank you for sharing it.
And then you know what? And actually, that's what I have found almost I don't know what the percentage would be, 90, 90% will say, is what people have done. Very few people have actually chosen from my menu the
Yeah.
pre-built classes. It's
Yeah.
it's it's really been that first meeting where we decide, okay, let's sit down and where it looks like they want to potentially hire me to help them. And it's that first meeting where we roll up our sleeves and I say, okay, let's talk in detail. What are the problems you're
Yeah.
having? I just had a call the other day with LA County Fire in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and we were able to roll up our sleeves and say, okay, what are the problems your EMS units are experiencing? And none of those predetermined or those pre-built classes are going to work by far, not at all.
Right.
And certainly nothing that we get in aviation is really probably going to help at all. And it would be foolish. And there are companies that do this. There are companies that say, well, this is going to work and it's a plug and play and they charge a ridiculous amount of money
Okay.
and off they go. We don't do that.
Okay. This is an interesting conversation because you could take the approach to say, well, it doesn't fit, but I can customize it to make it work. But if I'm not the right fit for you, I don't want to take your money because I'm going to do an injustice to what you ultimately want to do. So there is a huge difference as we're discovering, Shawn, through this conversation. The difference is what they want to have happen versus what they need to have happen. So it's our job as the facilitator of good business and somebody looking to provide performance results and outcomes. We have to learn what they're looking for, not necessarily what they want. And they're always different, right? Somebody
Exactly.
may tell you, I want whatever purple polka dots, but at the end of the day, purple polka dots doesn't work for them. They want blue squares or they
It's
need blue squares, right?
and sometimes they don't understand what they really need because they're not the experts, right?
Correct.
That's why they've come to us. So, sometimes they get like 50% of it right. These are our problems. We think we need this, this, and this, and we're good to go. Where I could say, well, you need some of that. You probably don't need this, but we're missing some things. We also need to address these other problems as well. And a second component of this that I think is really important is that I have, because of all my contacts in the industry, have, from working in the safety industry for, a little bit more than 3 decades, I have a network of people that have specialties in other areas that I do not have. Um, so, auditing and so forth, I wouldn't pretend to say that I am the expert in auditing. I'm not. Could I muddle my way through it and maybe look like it's impressive and so forth and put on a great dog and pony show? Yeah, I could probably pull it off, but I don't run my business that way. I want them to get the best
Yeah.
product. So I'm going to lose the money on the deal. However, I do know a person in the industry that is considered a world-class leader in auditing. And I would call John and say, look, this case I have or this company, this is really for you. Th-
Yeah.
You are the person that should have this, and I'm gonna hook you up with these folks. And I think this one is yours. And conversely, a lot of these other people do the same with with
Sure.
me as well.
And what I would describe that as, Shawn, is expertise and action. And what I mean by that is I have the knowledge and the wisdom and experience. So my expertise indicates I know what I'm doing, but I'm not the expert you're looking for. I
That's
need to
right.
pass you off to somebody else. And that is recognition of your own capabilities and what a customer is looking for. So I can't meet your want, but I know somebody who can. Man, that's a valuable piece of hubris. It's a really incredible piece of expertise and action because you're recognizing I can help you, but I'm not the guy that's going to get you the result you want. Let's move you to somebody else. Again,
I see it as a
credibility
good
comes, right? Credibility comes along with that.
I see it as a good ethical way to
Yeah.
run a business. It's ethics. And putting the ethics part behind is, and there's also a chance that later down the road, and this is not the reason I do it, but it also has the side benefit that possibly, and I'm not sure this has happened yet, as long as I've been doing this, but there's always the possibility that later down the road, they might have a need that's something
Yeah.
that I could address.
Yeah.
And they may come back to me and say, this was, a company, a person that was ethical and did not try to BS us and sell us some ridiculously expensive program that really wasn't going to meet our needs. That's not the reason I do it. I do it because it is the ethical right thing to do, and I do want them to get because think about it. What we're doing is safety related work, and in a lot of these cases that I deal with is people have been hurt. A lot of these companies come to me after there's been an incident or a fatal accident. Rather than before something has happened, a lot of time it's reactive after it's happened. So the consequences are high.
Yeah. Very high.
Um, so that's kind of the approach and the way I think of how to run my company and how approach the individuals or the organizations that come to me.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of this and what is at the cornerstone of all this. Your expertise, yes, but you are forging relationships based on your credibility, your ethics, the way you run your business, because people know, like, and trust you to a point where the experience leads them to believe this is a guy that knows what he's talking about. He's good at what he does, yes, but he's honest. and he's somebody I would like to have a relationship with. That's why they call you years down the road to have you help them because they know who you are. That's a great lesson that businesses should take advantage of. Getting to be known for trust and service and expertise, you can't go wrong with that. So I give you credit for putting that all together over 16 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been in this 16 years, you've got a lot of different experiences. What is the one thing that you would say, Shawn, that is at the top of your list of that's the one challenge I overcame, and I'd like other people to learn from my challenge? Is there something that really speaks to you?
I would probably say that in the beginning, I did not do a very good job of getting out there and advertising
Hmm.
myself in person. And what I mean by that is in my business, there are a lot of conferences, meetings and so forth. And I did not invest the money initially to go to some of these conferences, either to socialize with people at mixers and so forth, or to write papers or abstracts
Yeah.
to have those accepted. And I realize a lot of your listeners, that might not be an option because their businesses are so unique. That might not be an option. But for some of them, it might be. If
Hmm.
anything, to at least go to the conferences to meet people, um, that I have found later on that if I did take the time and spent the money out of my own pocket, what I found was I started to become surprised how many people that I would get calls sometimes, it may take 5 months, but I would get a call many months later, hey, this is so and so. Do you remember me from Baltimore? You gave that presentation on whatever. I would like to talk to you about, my company. We make widgets, and we've been having problems on the assembly line with some of our workers getting their hands stuck in the widget making machine or whatever.
Right, right.
It had nothing to do with the conference. It wasn't a conference about widget making. It was a conference about something else. But they saw me in person. They got a chance to listen to me as opposed to just seeing a website
Yeah.
or just seeing an ad somewhere or something like that.
Well, what you're explaining is taking the investment, whether it's the time you have, the money you have, or the input into something, making the investment in marketing is one of the most strategic things a business can do. But I also tell you it's one of the most challenging and frustrating things to do because you don't always get the results or yield
You don't.
immediately as one expects. So, marketing and sales are two very different activities and strategies. When people look at marketing, they need to look at it as how many conversations am I starting? How many hands do I get to have raised to want to know more about me? And how do I gain their interest in such a way that they're looking to engage? While sales is, I'm going to tell you everything great about me and ask you for an order. They're two very different approaches to the marketplace and what you want to get done. I'm simplifying it for the grand scope of things. But in essence, investing in marketing is one of the strongest strategies a business can have. But I do recognize it's one of the hardest and most expensive things to do because sometimes it just doesn't work and you have to keep testing and changing up what you do to get people to resonate. So I give you credit for making that recognition. Um, Now that you've been around for a while, your reputation is out there. It doesn't necessarily precede you. Well, I don't know, but your reputation has now been built on 16 years of experience and results and trust, as we've talked. So now that you're beyond that, how do you explain what you do for marketing now? Is it a different approach?
The only thing that I do different now, and this has been pretty much over the last, maybe 5 or 6 years, that a lot of the work I do is subject matter expert work for
Mhm.
lawsuits. So I do have a couple of the companies that list for attorneys to go look. Like, for example, if they're looking for a human factors person, they can go to these companies and say, "Hey, find me a human factors person."
Okay.
in aviation or just a generic human factors person, that I do invest a little bit of money being on those lists. I think I
Sure.
have just three companies that I'm involved in.
Okay.
So surprisingly, that hasn't really yielded a lot of work, but they're not tremendously expensive um, to do something like that. So I think one, maybe two cases that I've gotten, or that I've been able to obtain from that, um, has already paid for, the years I've been doing it, and the next several years I'm going to be doing it. So I realize for a lot of your listeners that that's probably pretty unique to my line of work, that might not be something that's going to work for all of them. Some
Well,
of them possibly.
no, you bring up a good point, but the point that you're making is now that I've been established, I don't have to do all the heavy lifting marketing that I was doing before to get myself out there and build a brand. But now that my brand has been built, I'm strategically going after the businesses and relationships I know will yield me something that's valuable for me to do as a business. So that is exactly like if you're looking at a business arc or a life cycle arc, right? You are at the top of the curve on the other side of it from your advertising perspective because your message is already out there before you. And now you are looking at a different channel. There's nothing wrong with that. And this is what I want to have about these conversations, right? Is you started off with the challenge of I didn't do a good enough job of it. And now the job you do with it is so perfect for what you're getting because you know exactly what you're doing. After 16 years, you're the subject matter expert. People seek you out. It's not the other way around,
That you,
right?
you're
It's
exactly
there's a maturity level to it.
you're exactly right. Some of the cases that I have received in the past 5 or 6 years have strictly been word of mouth.
Yeah.
They have been attorneys talking to other attorneys and saying, "Hey, this is the guy I used." And
And
some of
but
them have been very, very high profile. So I've been just as
yeah,
surprised when the
but
phone
think about
rang.
how good that is, right? That referral base is handoff from one person to the next that says, I know, like, and trust Shawn so well, you need to work with him. Okay, people will rely on that referral and that testimonial to say, I don't need to go look around. I already know I already have the person I
Yeah,
want because he comes credentialed. Whether it's actual letters after your name from a credentialing perspective, or the credentials of somebody I already know, like, and trust is giving me a name of somebody they know, like, and trust. I'm on, excuse me, I am on board. It makes sense to just give you what we're looking to do for this project. I love
yeah.
this though because the marketing challenge is never going to be solved. I just want you and the audience to know it's never going to be solved because as we're talking about you going through 16 years and now you're on the different side of the maturity life cycle for yourself. If you wanted to change your business and get after a different target audience, you'd have to go through this process all over again,
Yeah.
right? Because the people that know, like, and trust you throughout the universe do so because of who you are and the brand you've created. If you're going to bring a different service to the business, well, yeah, we're going to have to start over and go all the way through the process again.
Yeah.
But you have an accelerator that is the rocket tied to your back, which is already who you are in this space that people know. So there's advantages to it. I'm not saying you want to recreate your business. That's not what I'm suggesting.
No.
I'm
Yeah.
saying if you wanted to add a brand new service, you have a very much shorter timeline to maturity in your marketing than somebody who's starting from scratch. And that's something you build over 16 years. Again, another lesson that we're talking to the audience about is there are plenty of 12-year-old overnight successes. Okay. It
Hmm.
takes
Yeah.
time to do this the right way. And what we as business owners fail to recognize is our success that we're chasing, we want it a lot faster than it comes.
Oh man.
So sometimes patience is a virtue. So I appreciate your comments, conversation about how long you've been in business and how great it's been to you. But there's been ups and downs, right? It's not
Oh yeah.
necessarily always easy to do. Um, what I'm interested in is some of the lessons that you've kind of taught yourself or have been forced to be taught over the years that again would be a good piece for somebody to pay attention to. Like marketing was a challenge. What lesson do you think is one of the most prominent lessons you've learned? And does it fall into the category of time, money, people, or motivation? Like, where do you think is one of the bigger lessons you've learned over your career?
I would probably say that I come from a background in the airline industry where you frequently have to fight a lot of battles.
Hmm.
So a lot of those conversations can be rather heated, and we'll just leave it at you have to fight a lot of battles sometimes.
Are we talking about politics and motivation and alignment to vision and mission? Or are we talking about personalities that are difficult to deal with? How does that fall into your thought
Yes,
process?
yes, both of those. So,
Okay. Okay.
at your own airline with people over safety concerns and safety constraints and operational constraints, I was a person that was one of many that, was in the middle of some of those clashes, and sometimes those discussions become very heated and so
Yeah.
forth, and you become very used to that. And then sometimes you're in meetings with the FAA, and sometimes those meetings become very heated. And the one thing that I learned early on, because I lived that life for 15 years, was I needed to have a little more patience in the beginning with organizations that I interacted with.
Yep.
Now, I don't say that meaning that I went in there guns blazing, and when they would say really stupid things, I reacted to them like I did those other people, my airline and the FAA and so forth. Um, but I should have had more patience with them and taken more time to try to hold their hand and walk them through um, why they're wrong. why
Understood.
why they're wrong,
Okay.
and why, because I chose the name of my company intentionally. It was very intentional. Investigation and education.
Yeah.
So, we do both.
Hmm.
And I think that education part begins at the very beginning with the first meeting. And I think
Okay.
I lost sight of that and didn't always appreciate that.
Okay.
So some of those first meetings were frustrating at times. And I'm not saying I was unprofessional, or people
Understood.
hung up the phone on each other or anything. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, looking back now, I I could have done a better job of doing a little more hand holding and trying to walk them through and show them, you know, I
Sure.
think that's probably the number one thing.
This is a great point. I remember going through training, and you're trying to be as good as you possibly can be. And somebody made the comment, it's really hard for intelligent people to act stupid. So, right, when you are confronted with a situation where your intelligence could easily escalate a situation or de-escalate the situation. Find the best way to de-escalate it because somebody doesn't necessarily have the same thought process or experience, wisdom that you do. So make sure you're the one that directs the conversation in the right place as opposed to allowing something to get in the way. So I appreciate that conversation because
Yeah.
patience is a very interesting way of saying I can't believe you guys don't see this. I can't believe you're not doing this the right way. So you have to find a better way of doing it. So thank you for that because this conversation, Shawn, has been loaded with great information. As you talk about your business and you're laying out, you need to be nimble. You need to use discovery. We have to identify needs versus wants, and then my expertise comes into play. And when my expertise is on the line, I'm going to be the gate that says I can help you, or I'm going to pass you to somebody who's better at what you're looking for because I've discovered your want more than your need. That to me is exactly what businesses should be doing. And then when you talk about ethics and credibility, I'm building relationships off that. This is the sound foundation of a business that, despite the fact that marketing may have taken a little longer than you wanted to get going, but it's built you a business that the reputation is solid. People want to seek you out because of what you do. That's a really good testimony to what you've done and how you've built this business. So thank you for sharing it with us. I think there's a lot of people that could do a lot a lot with their own business when they solidify who they are as a business first, and then they start trying to sell to people. Because I think so many times we have businesses that come out of the gate with guns ablazing and they don't know what direction they're going or how they want to run it. And
Yeah.
they find themselves running afoul because they can't figure out how to get out of this wheel.
Yeah.
And for you to explain it the way you've done, I really appreciate it because it's straightforward.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, we've been talking for about a half an hour.
Oh,
And I've
wow.
got I've got a question I like to ask people as we finish up just to see how they react. So I'm going to set you into a time machine and send you back to meet 18-year-old Shawn. You two sit down on a park bench, and
He was a mess. He was a
what's that
mess.
conversation sound like, Shawn?
Well, especially, I think you've seen my CV, especially that situation, because, none of my life has ever been planned, how I ended up where I am. But wow,
Yeah.
that is a tough one. I think what I would probably set down and tell that Sean is to, as he goes forward in his life, make sure that he better understands the different scenarios and jobs that he's in and has the right temperament at the right time.
Okay.
So when I was a firefighter, that's a certain temperament and environment that's different when I worked in toxicology versus the airline versus, whatever. Now, a lot of that's a
Hmm.
maturity thing. And I, certainly became better at that the older I got. But in the very, very early years, there was just Sean, and
Great.
I started to figure out the older I got, and I started changing careers that wasn't the case. That
Okay.
there was, especially when I was working two jobs at one time, and they were complete opposite ends. I needed to have two different Seans depending on if I was a
Yep.
firefighter that day or if I was working in the hospital as a toxicologist the next day. I had to be two different Seans.
I like the idea and the reconnection to being true to yourself. And wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, and where you may be, just be true to yourself. That's a great lesson and great message to finish up with. So thank you, Shawn.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely.
Great conversation. I hope everybody gets a chance to connect with Shawn. All his information will be in the description down below. And we will see you all in the next episode of the Legacy Leaders.